Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Just a reminder, we'll be continuing our halaqah series, inshallah ta'ala, on Islam and critical thinking. Everyone is welcome to join us. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilman wa amalan wa ikhlasan ya rabbil alameen. So inshallah ta'ala, we are going to continue our discussion on the aql, the intellect, and the understanding of the intellect from the Islamic perspective, how Islam teaches us about reason and rationality, and what we can learn from that understanding and apply to our current situation today. And we've been discussing the history of the aql, the history of the intellect, tarikhul aql, from the time of Prophet Adam alayhi salam, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Adam alayhi salam the aql and its role as being part of his duty as a khalifa on this earth. How the aql allows the human being to gain knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know the purpose one has in life, to avoid bloodshed and corruption, the two things that the angels asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about. We talked about how the aql is connected to the fitrah. The fitrah is the natural inclination of the human beings to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to do what is good, and how it's connected to the mithaq, the covenant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took from human beings. We talked about how the aql is threatened by the whisperings of shaitan, and we talked about the different sources of thoughts that come to a person. We talked about how the aql can be threatened by shirk, how shirk deforms the aql. Polytheism causes the aql to lose its clarity, to lose its ability to see and understand directly its moral duty and commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and its obligations in this world. So we saw how shirk deforms the aql, shirk deteriorates the aql. And then we talked about, after the time of Prophet Adam and Prophet Nuh's time, how shirk began and what effect that had on the human aql, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets and messengers throughout time to restore the aql based on wahi, based on revelation, to bring the aql back to its correct foundations, to recalibrate the aql so that it is ethically effective. And then we talked about how in the time of Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ, the connection between the aql and da'wah. We talked about the connection between the aql and da'wah, and how Ibrahim ﷺ used the aql in his debates and discourse with his father, with his people, with Nimrud, with the king, with the debates with Ashab al-Nujum, the people who were worshipping the stars, the celestial bodies. So we saw the role of the aql in the time of Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ. Then we talked about how in Islamic history, the aql has played a role in how Muslim scholars were able to combine an understanding of deen and dunya, an understanding of ayat al-kawniyah and ayat al-Qur'aniyah, the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in nature and the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in scripture, and how the aql was used in Islamic history to advance the study of the natural world. In fact, we talked about how some of the greatest scientific achievements happened during the period of Islamic scholarship, and how astronomy and medicine really advanced in the Islamic civilization as a result of this Islamic worldview and the Islamic foundations laid for the aql. And what I realize is that before continuing with the Islamic history, actually there's a crucial step that we kind of skipped over that I want to go back and talk about, and that is aql in the time of the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So we want to talk about today, in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what lessons can we learn from the da'wah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, from the Quranic da'wah, that show us how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was restoring the aql in his time, how the aql had been corrupted amongst the Quraysh, so that the Quraysh were no longer able to understand truth versus falsehood, right versus wrong, as a result of some of these corruptions of the aql in their time. And how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ specifically called them towards principles that restored the aql in their time. Now, what are some of the ways that you guys can think of how the Quraysh were misguided in their aql in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? Yes. They used to bury their baby girls alive, right? So we talked about how the aql includes moral values. Now, you would think, according to your aql, you would think it is completely unthinkable for somebody to bury their own baby child alive. That is something that is morally unthinkable. How can you have an aql that is so deteriorated that a person can have a child and then go and bury their own child alive? Because they're so embarrassed that it's a daughter and not a son. This is a deterioration of the aql. So you can see how the aql is deteriorated in this respect. It's an excellent example. What is another way in which the Jahiliyyah Arabs were deteriorated in their aql? That one of the ways in which Islam called them to restore the aql through the Quranic da'wah, through the revelation. Yes? They had superstitious beliefs. Excellent. Can you give me an example? Okay, yes, this is an excellent example. There's actually quite a few examples the Quran mentions of the superstitious beliefs of the Quraysh. So one example is that if you come back from a journey, then you can't go in through the front door, you have to come in through the back door, right? So this was one example. Another superstitious belief they had is they had certain camels. The Quran makes reference to certain camels that, okay, this camel is pregnant and gives birth to a daughter. Now you can't touch this camel. And the Quran mentions the different names of these different types of camels, right? They would have all these superstitious beliefs about these camels, right? A camel that gives birth to a female and then a son. I can't remember the exact details, but you can look it up in the tafsir. That's all these different types are mentioned. Superstitious beliefs, right? So you can see that this is something we would regard as irrational, illogical. It doesn't agree with the aql, but you can see how the aql can be misguided. So that's another example. So we said the immorality of infanticide, burying the daughters alive, and then the irrationality of superstition. What is another way in which the Quraysh were degraded in terms of their aql? Yes?
The idols themselves, they thought that we can't talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. We have to use the idols to talk to Him.
Excellent. So the idol worship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Zumar, the 39th chapter of the Quran, that they said about their idols, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفًا. That we don't worship these idols except so that they can bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This idea that we can't speak to God directly, we can't make dua to Him directly, we need these intermediaries. It is a distorted view of reality. Who told you that Allah cannot hear your prayers? Who told you that Allah cannot answer your prayers? Who told you that you don't have the ability to communicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly? This is a distorted understanding of reality that comes from shirk, that comes from their idol worship. So this is another way in which their aql did not allow them to, to understand reality correctly. To the extent, and I'll mention this, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he said that after I became Muslim, I used to remember sometimes in Jahiliyyah that I had an idol made out of dates. And when I was hungry, I used to eat from the idol. And he's saying this laughing, like how distorted was my aql then that I would consider this thing my God and I'm eating from it, right? And just because I'm hungry, right? I want to snack on it, I'm snacking on my God, right? And he's saying like, subhanAllah, how Islam saved us from that. Now here's the important point. His intelligence, like if you took an IQ test of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, it didn't change. It's not an IQ difference. This is why the secular notion of intellect doesn't capture the true understanding of aql. You need to have guidance in order for your aql to function correctly. It's not just about, can you do this mathematical problem? Can you solve this pattern recognition or this geometrical problem? The aql includes morality. It includes spirituality. It includes your worldview. It includes your understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Your understanding of what will happen after you die. All of this is included in the aql. So you can have, yes, you can have smart people do stupid things. There's psychology articles written about this. Why do smart people do stupid things, right? And the reality of the matter is that it has nothing to do with, oh, this person's IQ is this person's IQ is that. The IQ testing is, based on one very limited domain of ability in abstract reasoning and pattern recognition, whatever. The reality is, it's based on guidance. Guidance develops your aql. Guidance, hidayah, is necessary to develop the aql so that we remove ourselves from immorality and irrationality. And we are brought out of the darkness into the light. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the friend and protector of those who believe. He takes them out of darkness, not just darkness, darknesses into light. So the darknesses is the deterioration of the aql. And the light is the light of guidance, hidayah. So you see this as well with the example of idol worship. One person, the same human being, can recognize that I was completely irrational before, and now alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided me. And I used to do things that now I would laugh when I recall those things. I would laugh at how could I be so foolish that I would do something. That is the nature of guidance. Guidance completely changes a person's outlook. And what's happening today is we have people focused on information, focused on data, focus on an education system that doesn't give people guidance. So you can have people who with PhDs justifying things that are immoral, irrational, bizarre, because their educational experience did not give them moral training, did not give them an understanding of the purpose of life, a proper worldview, a way to evaluate and frame what is right and what is wrong. This is how we have to connect aql with worldview. Another example, just on the point of idol worship, since it's so profound, there was another person in Medina. When the da'wah first started in Medina, there was an older man. You know, the younger generation, they accepted Islam earlier. So the older generation that was more set in their ways. They were more resistant to this new da'wah. And that shows us that there is a risk if we go a long period of time without recalibrating our aql with guidance, then something that is irrational may start to seem rational to us. And so there was one man, an older man in Medina, he used to worship an idol, and some of the youth, they had a very creative way of giving him da'wah. First they tried giving him da'wah and he was angry. He said, no, I'm worshiping my idols, I'm not abandoning the way of our forefathers. So what did they do? They would take his idol at night and throw it in the sewage. And in the morning he would go and he'd look for the idol everywhere. He'd be searching up and down the streets of Medina, and finally he would come to the dump and the sewage and he would see his idol there. And he would spend the whole day cleaning it, polishing it, perfuming it, put it back in its place. And then the next day, the same thing. And then finally the third day, I believe it was the third day, he took his sword and he hung it around the neck of the idol and he said, here, if you have any power, defend yourself. Use this sword, protect yourself, stop these people who are doing this to you. And again he found the idol in the sewage. And this time when he saw it lying there in the sewage, he said to it, he said, if you had any power, you could have stopped this, you know. And that's when he abandoned shirk and he decided to become Muslim. So it took these different steps for him to realize, you know, what he was doing was so profoundly irrational that he's worshiping something that is made out of stone, made out of rock, made out of wood, whatever it is. And one of the things I hope that it has become clear through these halaqah series is that, yes, maybe in their time, a lot of the idols that they were dealing with were idols made out of stone or wood or physical idols. But human beings also carve idols, not just in terms of out of physical materials, but also they carve idols of thought, idols of ideologies, certain negative, dysfunctional ways of thinking, the isms of society that mislead so many people. And this comes under the heading of taghut. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ. Verily, we sent amongst every people, we sent a messenger with the same message. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abandon the taghut. Abandon the taghut. Now, what does taghut mean? How would you translate taghut in English? Have you come across any translations of taghut? Yes. Falsehood, okay. What else?
It's veneration of something, not necessarily an idol, but something.
Okay, excellent. Veneration of something, anything. It doesn't have to be an idol. Okay. Excellent. Yes. Old traditions. Okay, excellent. What else? So, one of the scholars of tafsir, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, he's actually one of the earliest major sources of tafsir. He died 310 Hijri, famous scholar of tafsir. He mentioned taghut is a comprehensive term for everything that is worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it is an idol, whether it is a false preacher, whether it is even an idea. Anything that is worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anything that leads people away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a taghut. So it's actually a very comprehensive term. And you know what I find interesting is that amongst Muslims, we don't use this term very much. And yet it's a very powerful Quranic term. So we need to revive our understanding of the term taghut. We use other terms. We use the term shirk. We use the term kufr. We use different terms to talk about misguidance. But the term taghut is a term that has become rare in today's Muslim vocabulary. But it's very comprehensive because it encompasses any source of misguidance or deviation in society. And if we were to understand this term correctly and apply it in our times, we would recognize that yes, the taghut in the time of the Quraysh may have been these physical idols. In our times, what are the taghut today? Right? It may be very different. It may be certain ideologies, certain isms that are leading people astray. It may be certain industries, the entertainment industry, the military-industrial complex industry, right? All these different industries that lead people away. It may be certain institutions in society, right? The systems of government that are run by corporations that give people no control over their rights. There may be many different types of taghut in society that lead to the proliferation of evil and injustice and immorality, that lead people away from the deen, lead people away from the truth, lead people away from justice. So if we revive the understanding of this term, we'll be able to see with greater clarity what are the potential dangers and what are the potential challenges that we as Muslims have to confront with our ethical response. What Islam is preparing us, our ethical worldview, what are the obstacles to that worldview today? The obstacles to our worldview today are not going to be like an idol that you have to go and throw in the sewage, right? The obstacles to our worldview today are different types of idols, right? The idols of ideologies. So this is an important reflection. Now, was there anything else that you guys want to mention for some of the ways in which Quraysh were deformed in their intellect, in their aql, ways in which their thinking was led astray? Yes. Contradictions in their beliefs. Okay, for example? Okay, this is a good point. So even the way that they were reacting to the Prophet Muhammad's claim to be a messenger, it's clearly irrational, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes that this is a man who lived amongst them for 40 years. They knew he's the most trustworthy person, to the extent that even after he claimed to be a prophet, when the Prophet Muhammad wanted to migrate to Medina, he gave instructions for things that they had entrusted with him to be returned to them. Right? At that time, they didn't have banks. Right? So if somebody had valuables, sometimes they would keep it in the possession of somebody. And the Quraysh, they had many valuables with the Prophet ﷺ. Even while they were fighting him and opposing him, they knew he's still the most trustworthy amongst them. So many of them, they had their valuables with him. So they knew he's trustworthy. They knew he's an honest person. And yet they still have these contradictory claims. When the Quran mentions this, وَقَالُوا أَضْغَاثُ أَحْلَامٍ بَلِ افْتَرَاهُ بَلْ هُوَ سَاحِرٌ فَلْيَأْتِنَا بِآيَةٍ كَمَا أُرْسِلَ الْأَوَّلُونَ. It's like they keep saying contradictory claims, right? They say it's mixed up dreams that are coming to him, or no, he's a poet, no, he's a magician, he's a fortune teller. They can't even come to a rational conclusion because their aql is so focused on their own pride and holding on to their own ideas and their own privilege in society. They feel threatened by his message, so they come up with these contradictory things to avoid acknowledging the reality, which is clearly the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is a true messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did you want to elaborate on anything? Yeah. Yeah, so Walid ibn al-Mughira, the father of Khalid ibn al-Walid, Walid ibn al-Mughira was the chief of Banu Makhzum, And he was, of the leaders of Quraysh, he was the one who the Quran mentions in Surah Al-Muddathir about how he was scheming, trying to come up with some claim that they could mention about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ نَظَرَ ثُمَّ عَبَسَ وَبَصَرَ ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ وَاسْتَكْبَرَ فَقَالَ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرُ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا قَوْلُ الْبَشَرِ سَأُصْلِيهِ سَقَرَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Walid ibn al-Mughira that he was plotting and scheming, trying to think of something to come up with a claim about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he said that this is some kind of sorcery. This is just the statement of a human being, right? So this shows you, the ways in which they were going to such extreme lengths to come up with an explanation to avoid the obvious. And that is something that is contradictory to the aql. The aql does not go to some extreme, far-fetched explanation to try to explain away the obvious. The aql goes with what is obvious, what makes sense. So you can see how the aql is being distorted. Yes? Okay, so there's a few things packed into that. So you mentioned about the power, about tribalism, and about the classism, elitism, the separation between the poor and the rich. So yes, there's a few things that we can mention about this. So if we think about some of the isms that the Quraysh had, that the Quran deals with, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with and deconstructed through the Quranic da'wah, one of the isms that we can mention is tribalism. Right? So tribalism was a big feature of their thought structure. It's a big way in which they used to think. Everything about how their worldview was shaped by tribalism. Their understanding of right and wrong was shaped by tribalism. So somebody from that tribe kills somebody from my tribe, then we will kill 10 people from that tribe. Like that's their understanding of what is right and wrong. Right? Their understanding of how to act is based on tribalism. Their whole society is structured around that. To the extent that even their rejection of the truth of Islam was motivated by tribalism. There's a statement from Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl, so within Quraysh you have many clans, right? So there's 3 clans that are the most powerful amongst the Quraysh. Do you guys know which are the 3 clans that are the most powerful? Banu Hashim, yeah. Yes, Abu Sufyan is from Banu Abd al-Shams. Yeah, and then the one I just mentioned a few moments ago, Banu Makhzum. Yeah, so these are the 3 clans. Actually, Banu Hashim and Banu Abd al-Shams are sometimes referred to by the father of Hashim and Abd al-Shams, Abd Manaf. So sometimes they say Banu Abd Manaf, Banu Makhzum. All of these are like the most influential clans within Quraysh, and then the other clans had a lesser status. But these are the clans that had all the major responsibilities. So Banu Abd al-Shams was in charge of the trade routes. That's why Abu Sufyan was in charge of trade, the caravan. Banu Makhzum, they were in charge of carrying the war banner. Right? So Khalid ibn al-Walid, he's from the clan that is responsible for the military of the Quraysh. Right? They're responsible for leading the troops into battle. And he was trained for that responsibility. So that's Banu Makhzum's responsibility. And Banu Hashim is responsible for taking care of the pilgrims who come for Hajj. Right? So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is from Banu Hashim. We mentioned Walid ibn al-Mughira, he's from Banu Makhzum. Another person who's from Banu Makhzum is Abu Jahl. So Abu Jahl, he said, when somebody asked about the truth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said something to the effect of that our clan, Banu Makhzum and Banu Abd Manaf, we were like 2 racing horses, neck and neck in a race. They would do this and we would do that. They would feed the pilgrims, we would try to feed the pilgrims to compete. They would do this, we would try to compete doing that. They would have these warriors, we would have these warriors. Whatever honor that Banu Abd Manaf had, Banu Makhzum was trying to compete. He said, then they come out with a person who says, I receive revelation from above the 7 heavens. How can we possibly compete with that? Wallahi, we will never believe in him till the end of the day, right? So this was the tribalism that motivated his rejection of the truth. We don't have to speculate why is it that they didn't want to accept Islam, the truth of Islam. We can see how the aql was distorted. There was a barrier there because of this ideology of tribalism. The tribalism prevented the aql from recognizing the truth of Islam. It was so distorted by this tribalism. Yes?
Tribalism. You just fast forward from tribalism. Wasn't there a tradition of Rasulullah saying that this will never leave my ummah? And even to this day, if you look at the whole ummah, from Casablanca all the way to China, we still have aspects of tribalism. And politicians and groups to this day are more beholden to their tribe than they are to anybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, is it an aspect of aql, if we're discussing intelligence of this, or is it just, this is how it's always been?
So tribalism is a natural phenomenon. And it's a phenomenon that threatens our aql if we don't, if we're not aware of it and we don't deal with this impulse. But you're right that even psychologists have shown, like, forget just the history of the ummah. Yes, of course we have tribalism, sectarian, different kind of elements within the history of the ummah and today as well. But even outside of the ummah, if you just look at human nature in general, psychologists have done experiments where they look at kids and they look at how easily they are able to identify somebody who's on their team. Well, initially, the kids growing up in a culture where the ethnicity is homogenous, they very quickly learn to trust people of the same ethnicity, people who speak the same language. Right? There's that inherent tribalistic kind of component. But you can change the experiment around where you actually have people wearing soccer jerseys, right, of a certain color, so that you have a red team and a blue team. And they will, if they get used to the blue being their team, and you ask them to judge certain things. I think one of the experiments, it was like, judge who is angry and who's happy based on these expressions. And they have like different colored jerseys. They're more likely to judge negative emotions from the other team than from the team that is on their side. So this idea of tribalism, like human beings, there's a natural tendency to see us versus them. But that tendency has to be regulated, right? Just like all desires, human beings have a natural desire to pursue certain things, right? To fulfill their desires in haram ways. But that's why revelation comes to lift the aql up from being controlled by the nafs. So you can say tribalism, yes, it's connected to impulse of the nafs. But that goes back to what we mentioned in one of the earlier classes. Where do negative thoughts come from? From shaitan and from the nafs. So here, tribalism has both aspects. There's the shaitanic aspect of tribalism, which is these bad ideas, the ideology aspect. There's also the nafs aspect, that it's natural for people to just say, well, this is my people, it's us versus them. And you see that happening today, right? Like if you look at the riots taking place in the UK, this is a perfect example of tribalism being stoked to increase hatred towards Muslims, right? So people like Elon Musk and others, they're creating this narrative that, there's going to be a civil war because we have all these Muslims, brown-skinned people coming, taking over. There's a white replacement theory. They want to replace white people. Or, they're making it bad to be white. All this kind of stuff to make people, young white males, feel like, our tribe, it's under attack. We have to rise up. See, so they're using the same tribalistic thing. So the same tribalism that we're talking about in the time of Quraysh, yeah, it's still happening today. There's still violence today. Riots happening today from the same Jahiliyyah mentality. And connected to tribalism is the concept of racism, which is another ism that Islam obliterates, right? So we have the verse in Surah Al-Hujurat that's very clear, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We made you into different nations and tribes. Allah made us into nations and tribes. But why? لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that you may know one another. Right? So that you may learn about one another. You have your own culture, there's another culture. You learn about different nations and tribes, you come to recognize one another. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Like immediately eliminates all racism. The most noble view in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the most righteous. Doesn't matter what race you are, what ethnicity you are. So this is why it's so significant in the Prophet Muhammad's da'wah. You see, in the farewell sermon, the Prophet Muhammad is saying, La fadla li'arabiyyin ala al-a'jabi. There is no virtue or superiority for an Arab over a non-Arab, or a non-Arab over an Arab, or a white over a black, or a black over a white. This is in the farewell sermon of the Prophet Muhammad. We're still seeing the implications of racism today. The ideology of white supremacism that shaped all of colonialism, right? We're still seeing that reality today. The racism which is resulting in dehumanization of Palestinians, right? Why is it that this massacre that just happened, right? The school that was bombed. And I don't see any coverage in Western media. These lives are just not worth anything to them. Right? It's deeply embedded racism. It distorts the way a person's mind works. A person's mind becomes twisted by racism, that they can't even see reality for what it is. That is what the Quran is telling us. And that is what Islam is teaching us. That racism is so toxic to the human mind. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, on one occasion, amongst the companions, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ heard that one companion referred to Bilal radiallahu anhu in a derogatory way. He said, "You son of a black woman." And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said to him, "Innaka rajulun fika al-jahiliyyah." He said, "You are a person in whom there is jahiliyyah." Which is very interesting. Jahiliyyah is the pre-Islamic ignorance. This is a Muslim he's referring to. But he says a statement of racism. He says, in you there is jahiliyyah. Like, you see the significance of this. Jahiliyyah means that it's distorting your aql. Jahiliyyah, what is jahiliyyah? It comes from the root word is jahl, ignorance, which is the opposite of ilm, knowledge. So he's using a term that ignorance, you would think this is a term that refers to lack of intellect, right? It's an intellectual term. Somebody does not possess knowledge. But he's using that to refer to the moral transgression of racism. That's very profound. It's showing us that your intellect, your aql is distorted by this racism. You have jahiliyyah in you if you engage in racism. And the tribalism thing is very interesting. Because yes, there is tribalism. There's a natural tendency towards tribalism amongst human beings. But look at how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is so cautious about it. That on one occasion when a fight broke out between the Ansar and the Muhajirin. And one of the Ansari person, he said, "Oh Ansar." And the Muhajir person, he said, "Oh Muhajirin." And they are calling both groups to come defend them. Now look, they're not calling an ethnicity or a tribe. They are using Islamic terms. Ansar is an Islamic term, Muhajirin is an Islamic term. The ones who migrated from Mecca to Medina, the Muslims who were already in Medina. These are Islamic terms. And despite using these terms, the Prophet Muhammad said, "Are you using the slogans of Jahiliyyah while I'm still amongst you?" That's a really profound thing. That means that to use even Islamic terms in this way that is feeding this tribalistic impulse of human beings is a manifestation of ignorance, is a manifestation of Jahiliyyah. And so we see how corrosive tribalism is to the human intellect. It is corrosive to the aql. So tribalism, racism. We mentioned already polytheism. What are some other isms amongst the Quraysh? Yes, Fatima. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ not to implement the punishment. Yes. Yes. So this is an excellent example. Jazakallah khair. So this would relate to this idea of elitism.
that there are certain rules for the commoners, the awam, and then there are rules for the elite. We see this in every society. Every society, they have this concept of elitism. You know, if a rich person does a crime, they're not subjected to the same punishments as the commoners. In fact, people are even mentioned, as the US election cycle is going on, Kamala Harris, she prosecuted many people who are black, who are lower socioeconomic status for marijuana, and then joked about using it herself, right? So people talk about this contradiction, where you have elites who, they don't follow the same rules as the commoners. The commoner gets thrown into jail for a fraction of a crime that elite people get away with. Look at the billionaires in society. The billionaires, they can do all sorts of crimes. They can use all kinds of illicit drugs and whatever. And they get away with so much stuff. They evade taxes. They don't pay any taxes, right? This is the result of this elitism. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was very upset when he heard this suggestion that this woman from this tribe, because she's from a powerful tribe, a very prominent elite tribe, that we shouldn't apply the punishment upon her. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, because the woman who did the crime, the theft, her name was Fatima. He said, if Fatima bint Muhammad, if Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, committed this crime, I would implement the punishment. There is no elitism in Islam. The same rule of law applies to everyone. And that's a very powerful understanding. That, again, is revolutionizing the way of thinking in the time of the Quraysh. Now you can see why the Quraysh are so bitterly opposed to the message of Islam, because it is threatening their entire worldview. It is threatening their entire outlook of reality. It is threatening their deformed and distorted aql by presenting a crystal clear aql that requires them to abandon these ideologies, these isms. Yes? Yeah, excellent. Yeah, similar to tribalism. So this idea, they said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, بل قالوا إنا وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإنا على آثارهم مقتدون. That they say, we found our forefathers upon a certain way, and we're going to follow that way completely. Right? They want to follow that the same way. Yes.
He also had changing the laws of the law. For example, with the months, the sacred months, they moved the calendar around, or even with the Hajj. I mean, they would, like the Quraysh wouldn't follow the same rituals as the other ones, so they would manipulate the laws of Allah when they found convenient.
Yeah, this ties into certainly the power structure and the elitism and the idea that the rules are not consistently applied, right? So this idea where, the four months of the year are sacred months. What they do is they commit a crime and then they say, well, actually, this is not the month of, this is not the month of Ramadan. This is the month of Muharram, right? This is not the month of Sha'ban. This is the month of Dhul Qa'dah, right? They changed the months. And so there was no consistency in which months they were counting. Like they didn't have a fixed calendar. They would manipulate the calendar so that they could attack another tribe when they wanted to make it convenient for them. And this is the same thing that you find today, is that the nations that hold up the world order, they manipulate the rules to suit themselves, right? So they say, such and such nation has a right to self-defense, but the other nation doesn't have a right to self-defense. They don't want to mention that, right? So the way they manipulate the rules, it's part of the elitism. That's part of how the powerful manipulate the rules. Yes?
My question is that we understand that it's racism.
Tribalism, elitism, yes.
We also see the same thing nowadays in our practical life and everything. How this, and here, I mean, the people in Europe, minority over there.
Right. Right.
How the Islamic leaders
That's the beautiful question. That's exactly what I hope the outcome of this halaqah series will be. Because the question is for us, how we can take this message of Islam and use it to help the world, right? To help other people who are suffering under these same ideologies that are perpetuating immorality and transgression and injustice in the world. And the way we have to do that is when we come to learn about Islam, a lot of people, when they approach studying Islam, they approach it as a set of rules and a set of beliefs without understanding the value system of Islam. And you can already see from understanding the aql how that's incorrect. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to understand Islam. Right? Islam is not a set of rules without aql. It's not just a set of information. Believe X, Y, and Z. Okay, believe in angels, believe in this, believe in Jannah and Jahannam. And it doesn't change the way you live your life. All of the beliefs of Islam are connected to your values. All of the stories that the Quran talks about have lessons. So Islam is about transforming us as individuals and as a community to make us morally guided and moral examples for others. So one of the things that we can start with is better understanding our own deen and understanding the message of Islam about these different components, these different isms. Understand how Islam gives us this worldview and then share these ethics with others. And tell people, my understanding is this is not justice, what's taking place in the world today. Because you have the strong oppressing the weak. You have people of one race oppressing another. What my faith teaches and what I invite other people towards is that we should have rule of law. We should have justice for all human beings. Right? You start sharing the message of Islam with others. This is exactly how the Sahaba did da'wah in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. If you look at when Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh, when he went to An-Najashi in Abyssinia, An-Najashi, the Negus of Abyssinia, he asked him, what is this Islam that you're calling people towards? He didn't start by saying, the 5 pillars of Islam. That's how we normally talk about Islam now. When we have open houses in the masjid, we say the most important thing to know about Islam is the 5 pillars. But most of the 5 pillars were revealed later, in the Medinan period, right? The obligation of Ramadan came down in Medina. The obligation of Hajj came down in Medina, right? What was the original message that was being preached that people had to understand to become a Muslim? That's what Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh answered. He said, ruler, he said, we were a people who the strong would oppress the weak. We used to eat dead animals. We would cut the ties of kinship. We didn't take care of the poor and the needy. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us a messenger who we knew his trustworthiness, his honesty, his standing amongst us. He called us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, to leave off idol worship, to speak the truth, to uphold our agreements, our promises, to take care of the poor and the needy, to uphold the ties of kinship, all of the moral values of Islam. That's how he summarized Islam. He summarized Islam based on summarizing the message of Islam, the values of Islam, the ethics of Islam. Because that's what all the beliefs and rules are guiding us towards, is those values. It's the purpose for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, to be a Khalifa on this earth. So, when we understand this message and this purpose in life, what do our Muslim leaders have to do today? We need to revive this discussion within the Muslim community. We need to focus on it as a priority within our communities. We need to start by eliminating racism and tribalism within the community. When we have racist or tribalistic sentiments, even in our own conversations. The Prophet ﷺ went to the point where he said that none of you should speak in one language if the third person doesn't understand that language. But that happens today in our own communities sometimes. 2 people will be speaking in Arabic, and the person who only understands Urdu and English, he's standing there, he doesn't understand what they're saying. Right? So we need to start following the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ to break down barriers. We are one ummah. We are all one human race. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Verily the believers are brothers. So this is that humanity that we have to bring back, that insaniyah. We need to revive it in the way that we teach Islam, in the way that we understand Islam, in the way we represent the message of Islam to others, and in the priorities that our community focuses on. Our community has to focus on the correct priorities. Advocating for issues of justice, not just for us, but for all human beings. This is a priority for us as an ummah. Does that answer the question? You had a question? Yes. Yes. You're right. Excellent. Yeah, very good point. The first public speech the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave in Medina, spread salam amongst yourselves, give in sadaqah, pray the night prayer, you will enter into Jannah in peace. This is a beautiful hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Excellent. Any other questions? Of the isms as well that we find amongst the Quraysh that Islam corrected, are two other ones that I will mention before we conclude today. One of them is their view about qadar, their view on destiny. Yes. Fatalism. Yeah, you can say fatalism or determinism. Fatalism, this idea that, we don't have any free choice. This same idea emerged later in Islamic history. They were called the Jabariyah. The Jabariyah. This mentality that the human being is majboor. I don't have any free choice. It's mentioned in the Quran. وَقَالُوا لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَا مِن دُونِهِ مِن شَيْءٍ نَحْنُ وَلَا آبَاؤُنَا وَلَا حَرَّمْنَا مِن دُونِهِ مِن شَيْءٍ. Right? They mention that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had willed, we wouldn't have worshipped other than Him. We would have not declared anything else prohibited. Right? Their understanding was that, look, Muhammad, you're telling us to worship Allah. If Allah wanted, we would be worshipping Him. So since we're not worshipping Him, why are you blaming us? This same excuse was given by Shaitan, by Iblis. Right? Iblis said, when he didn't prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him about that, he said, Rabbi bima aghwaytani. Oh, my Lord, because you have misled me. You made me do this. This idea of blaming God or taking no responsibility, this is connected to fatalism. Oh, what can I do? It's already in my fate. It's already written what's going to happen. Now, as Muslims, we believe in qadar. We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written what's going to happen, but we also believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us free will, has given us free choice, but He knows what we're going to do. He knows what we're going to choose. He has given us free choice, but He knows what we're going to choose. So that allows us to escape this problem, this philosophical dilemma that people have between fate and free will. But the Quraysh, they were fatalists. Now in our times, that fatalism has come back in the form of determinism amongst people who adopt this naturalistic worldview, the worldview of modern scientists that excludes any understanding of religion or the supernatural or the divine. And they say, it's all physical causes. They don't say now that, if I don't worship God, it's because God didn't want me to. They say now it's the chemicals in my brain. It's my genes. It's my genetics. It's chemical reactions in my brain I don't have any control over. Everything is just reduced to neurochemical reactions in the brain, and therefore I don't have any free choice. The same kind of thought process comes up. And you can see how that removes any moral responsibility. And that is why it's corrosive to the aql. It's corrosive to the aql. The last ism that I will mention before we conclude for Salatul Isha is the ism that is related to a denial of the hereafter. The ism that is related to denial of the hereafter. So this was another thing that the Quraysh had, which the Quran also responded to, is that they would say, إِنْ هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. They would say that verily it is only the life of this world, the life of this dunya. We die, we live and we die, and nothing destroys us except for time. And they would make fun of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? They would crush bones in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and blow the dust in his face and say, you know, قَالَ مَنْ يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ. Right? Who's going to bring back these bones when it's dust? So the Quran responded to this and it gives many proofs about the resurrection. The one who will bring it back to life is the one who gave you life in the first place. There are scholars of tafsir actually point out how many different types of proof the Quran gives about the resurrection. And believing in the afterlife is actually something very important for our aql to work properly. Because if you believe that it's only this life and that's it, there's, you know, we die and ultimately, you know, nothing happens to us in the end, that creates an idea of nihilism. There's no ultimate meaning or purpose. So it creates this idea of nihilism that my actions ultimately don't have any consequences. So how can you behave ethically if you believe there's no ultimate consequences for your actions? And that's what we see today. The tyrants, they oppress everyone in society. They oppress others because they believe they'll get away with it. They don't believe they'll stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. Right? وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as for the person who fears standing in front of his Lord and he restrains himself from following his desires, that's the person who will have Jannah. So having a denial of the hereafter, denial of the afterlife is one of the problems of materialism. I didn't mention the ism, this is materialism, the denial of the hereafter. The belief that it's only this physical world, there's no hereafter. This is one of the problems and how it actually corrupts the aql, how it destroys the aql and prevents people from reasoning in ethical ways. Yes? Yeah, so materialism has many different definitions, right? So materialism in our times means the worship of matter, basically, or belief in, like philosophical materialism, belief in just what can be detected by science, right? Matter. But what we mean by materialism in their times is the denial of the hereafter, right? The belief that there's only this material life. There's no life after this life. But yes, you can use the term in different ways. Because they did believe in spirits, the deserts and jinn and whatnot. Look into what, sir? Yes, yes. So this is connected to what was mentioned at the beginning of how they used to bury their daughters alive. This is this is another example of one of the ways that the Quraysh, they had this distorted understanding. This distorted aql is, yes, they consider women as less human. Many ancient cultures did this as well. And this is one thing that if you look at the Quran and you look at Surah An-Nisa, for example, every single thing that is mentioned in Surah An-Nisa is challenging the Quraysh in terms of how they viewed women and challenging it in favor of the rights of women. Everything that is mentioned in Surah An-Nisa is challenging the status quo in favor of the rights of women. And this is true. Sorry? They couldn't inherit. Exactly. They didn't inherit anything. Even in Europe, up until the modern era, women were treated as property and were inherited. They did not have the right to inherit. So this is actually something that was not exclusive to Quraysh, but in many cultures around the world. This is something Islam corrected as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verses of the Quran, for example, that you have, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيعُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنْكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى بَعْضُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْضٍ. Their Lord responded to them, saying, I will not allow the actions of any one of you to go to waste, whether male or female. Each of you is equal unto the other. Yarhamukallah. So this is the example. Also we have the verse, in Surah Al-Ahzab, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, إِنَّ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَالْمُسْلِمَاتِ وَالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ until the end of the verse, mentioning believing men, believing women, Muslim men, Muslim women, and so on and so forth. Are we making the adhan for Salat al-Isha now, or what time is the adhan?
It's scheduled right now, but
It's time? No. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. عم يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وهاجا وأنزلنا من المعصرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به حبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا يوم ينفخ في الصور فتأتون أفواجا وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها أحقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا جزاء وفاقا إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء أحصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.